Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between.
He's a South Texan poppy poet living that hashtag middle class gay life. It's Chibbi.
She's a little bit Selena, a little bit J-Lo, and a whole lot of Pisces. It's Raqui.
And this is Words and Shit,
the show where you get to know the person behind the poetry.
Brought to you by Write Art Out. Hi, friends.
Hi, friend. Hi. Here we are again. Another week, another conversation.
Always. I know. I'm always so excited, to be talking about slam poetry and or just poetry in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
After a long day.
And
rushing and trying to find parking. And it's just, this show always very much fills my heart. So I'm excited for that today.
I totally feel that. And, slam has been on my mind a lot just because, certain scenes are starting their slam season. And then next month, there's this international queer slam happening in Baltimore that I'm going to be a part of. My husband's competing in. So it's almost like we're in slam, the month before nationals sort of thing, where it's okay, let's make sure all the travel arrangements are on things. And so slam has been very much on my mind, and has always kind of been a part of my poetry career, and it's how I got introduced to poetry that wasn't, Robert Frost and Sylvia Plath, right?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think even for me, definitely with poetry, we got the Robert Frost, Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson. Thank you. Because I wanted to say Emma Watson. I was like,
maybe a poet, but not taught, not part of the canon.
No. These very white traditional canons, right? And I think it was with slam that is the first introduction I saw where people of color, more queer people, indigenous people were really thriving in. It's because we go back into that oral type of indigenous history that we're so used to, and I was definitely introduced with that. Funny enough, in a poetry class in UTSA or in college. And I think the first ones were the Nuyorican poets, the OG Nuyorican poets.
I just love how slam has been an avenue that has opened doors and created opportunities for people to just learn and hone skills that maybe they didn't know that they could possess, and allow people to just kind of come out of boxes and really flourish as individuals, as performers, as writers, where they maybe never felt like that could be part of their lives. I know slam did that for me, and I'm so excited to dive into conversation with our guest today, who definitely, has taken her experience in slam and allowed that to kind of drive, even though it's kind of been a side thing, allow that to always be part of her life and give so much skill and experience and everything that she's been able to give back to us through her work. So I'm really excited. Raqui, tell us about our guest.
I know, me too. I'm excited. So our guest is Glori B. What? If you don't know, you're about to know. Glori B began slamming in 2012 and has competed on 7 slam teams, y'all. 7, winning the National Group P's finals in 2013, 2015, and making final stage at NPS in 2016. She's a 3-time national haiku deathmatch champion. That is no easy feat. Yes. And that she is a 3-time finalist at Texas Grand Slam and placed 6th in the 2018 Women of the World Poetry Slam. She founded Piecemeal Press and has published chapbooks by over a dozen Texas-based poets. She also co-wrote, directed, and performed in 5 short plays for the annual Frontera Fest Play Festival, with 4 plays being named the best of Fest. She has had poems published in Soaring Oak Review, Open Ear, The Universe, and Contra, Texas Poets Speak Out. Y'all, please welcome none other than the fabulous, amazing, y'all about to mind blown with their fabulous look tonight, Glori B.
Yeah, welcome to the stream, Glori.
Hello. I am here.
First of all, can I just say that you look like your hair, this outfit, this crown, everything. Just like it's giving me mermaid, it's giving me fairy, it's giving me celestial. It's just vibing from a different plane that we are just so blessed that you're coming down and blessing us with us.
I was really excited to get to like dress up because I am still kind of quarantined because of some family members that are sick, and with the Delta going around, like, so I'm still not going out. So it was really exciting to have a reason to put on makeup and a reason to do my hair.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you.
Yes. Well, you are stunting.
Mhm.
So we're just excited to have you in this space, to share space with you, get to know a little more about you, and hear your work, both old and maybe new, and just dive into.
Yeah, and just really get to know you, right? I think what we do, we definitely start off this the episode trying to get to know you. Obviously, you're going to be sharing intimate things about yourself, your words. And we like to just start off with asking, how's your heart? It could be, how's your heart today, this year, this pandemic, this pandemia, or just even today. Whatever you want. We just want to know how your heart's been.
Well, it ain't been great. I'll say that. It's been a hard pandemic, I think, for everyone. In the first year of the pandemic, I lost both my grandmothers, not to COVID, but I do think that the stress on hospitals and medical workers contributed to, at least in one of my grandmother's cases, why she passed. I think if the nurses and doctors hadn't been as stressed by COVID as they were at the time, what happened would have been survivable. And the end of my teaching career, and going through a lot of changes. It's been really hard, honestly, the last couple of years for me. And like I said, I live, like, my bubble contains someone who can't be vaccinated due to medical reasons, like doctor's orders until it's approved for like infants. My sister can't get vaccinated, and I live with one of her caretakers, and so I have not come out of quarantine yet. So it's still just me in my apartment hanging out, video chatting most of the time. Even though I am vaccinated, and if you're following me online, like, I've been advocating for everyone to get vaccinated, and I feel very strongly about that. But it just, like, it's not the kind of thing you want to take a chance with, especially having already lost 2 family members. It's not worth, going to a party. It's not worth, going to the bowling alley, like, that. This is, it's real, and it's heavy. So, like, my heart's mostly been heavy. And I'm the kind of person, like, if you ask me how I am, I'm going to tell you. Like, it's your fault for asking, almost.
No, it's good. It's good.
On the other hand, like, things have been really great with my partner. I think partially because we are so sort of bubbled off. Like, we were talking in the car the other night, and it feels like it's been 10 years, and it's only been 2. So I think it's just been a very intense 2 years. And you're kind of constantly coming in and out of, like, moving from, like, a period of, like, intensity and tragedy into a period of just prolonged boring shit, into another period of, like, intensity and trauma. And it makes it really hard to just, like, stay at home, but it also makes it really hard to leave the house, like, even for things that, like, would be safe. Yeah,
I think we definitely feel that. Everyone's like, yes, it's been very difficult, and what I appreciate, I think, about these past few years is that people have been able to be more open and honest about where they truly are at. I think, back, before the panaderia.
In the before times.
In the before times, it was like, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Oh, okay, good. You know, and now I think we're definitely much more connected to ourselves and each other.
I was never that person. Like, most people will tell you, like, if you, like, for years, like, if you ask me how I am, I will tell you, and it's probably bad. You know, like, oh, I'm tired. Oh, or I'll be like, I'm fine, just fine. Like, no, like, do you understand how good fine is? Like, do you understand, like, with everything that's going on, like, how amazing it is to have a day where I'm just fine?
Yeah.
Like, that's great. I would love to be fine.
Yeah.
No.
And I think, I feel like the world's kind of catching up to the idea that, like, social pressure to perform okayness is in itself, like, really hard to handle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was just as fine is fantastic. Like, yeah, if we can get to that
fantastic.
get to that
Really-
base level.
It really is. Like, I just received an email from my HR that was just like, "Oh, did you know October 10th is Mental Health like Day, World World Global Day?" And they're just like, "Have you been asked? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Wait, first of all, are we prepared? Are we trained to ask that question at work?"
Yeah, it's a lot, and I definitely understand, you know, like the need for connection and space, and that was definitely one of the reasons why we started this, because we started the show in April of last year when like the lockdown happened, and we were like, no, we need to create space. We need to still cultivate community. We need to still be able to come together in a safe way, and so that was kind of the impetus for starting this show. As a way to connect, because, you know, I think Corey Hunter says, I've seen this poet before on YouTube. Good Lord, she's a damn beast. And, you know, we are familiar with each other's work, right? And each other's poetry, which gives us clues as to who the person is. But do we really know each other, right?
Yeah.
And so
I think Slam is this weird little community where it's kind of like with like online friends, you know, like the joke is like, I know all of your childhood trauma, but I've never seen your legs. Where it's like, I know all of your like deepest, darkest secrets. I know things about you your mother does not know. And yet, like, I couldn't tell you what you do for a living. Like, I don't know your last name. In some cases, I don't even know your first name. Yeah. You know, like.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it, because that's the point, is to get to know the person behind the poetry. So one of the ways that we like to do just like a quick lightning round to give everyone just a little taste of who you are. I mean, I feel like we've already gone deep into the sauce of conversation.
Yeah.
But before we get deeper,
straight into the deep end.
We start with a little segment called speed dating. So we're going to ask you a series of questions. Feel free to answer them as concisely or as in-depthly as you feel is necessary to justify.
I'm going to try to be concise, but I'm not capable.
All right. That is okay. So first question. What was your biggest guilty pleasure from when you were a teenager? Or that maybe you loved then, but now is like a guilty pleasure?
Okay, so like something I loved when I was a teenager, and now I'm just like, I don't want to admit that I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
If we're talking music, I was really into Muse,
Okay.
and I think like I will still stand by like Origins of Symmetry, and maybe like up to Absolution, but like Knights of Sidonia, they kind of like went over the edge, and. I think it's a lot more embarrassing to be a fan, but I can still get down with like some old school Muse. Like, I think I'm just a little too old to like have really been a teenager, like a younger teenager when like emo was like actually a genre. Like when people were using that word to describe it, like it was just like sad alt rock when I was that age. But I also I got into like for a few years I got into like industrial goth, and like my favorite band was Orgy when I was 13. So you know, I think there's a lot of like music that I'll occasionally put on and just be like, yeah, this is trash, I love it.
I feel so triggered.
And then like I think Mountain Dew would be the other one. Like, I think just a huge, like, I feel like when I was probably 14 or so, like Mountain Dew was my personality, you know? And really all it was is that like my ADD was killing me and I was just self-medicating with caffeine. But like I would drink a can of Mountain Dew before bed. And what I know now, if you've ever like if you've been like that, like this might be a hint. What I know now is that like so they'll tell you that caffeine is supposed to like get you all like hyped up, but if you have ADHD, what it actually will do is it'll help you overcome executive dysfunction. So that's why, you know, they prescribe stimulants for people with ADHD. So yeah, Mountain Dew was definitely something that I was drinking a lot of when I was a teen. That was 5 answers. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. No, I love it.
Yeah, I was going to say, Glori, you and TikTok are just keep diagnosing me with so many different things. So like,
I am scared of TikTok.
It's
intimidating.
Yeah.
It is intimidating. The youth definitely make fun of the older generations, either you're millennial or Gen X. They're sometimes not kind.
They're supposed to.
Yes.
Honestly, a lot of the times when they're making fun of us, all they're doing is betraying that they don't understand, which is fine because we don't understand. Yeah. Like, no one understands the generation before or after them.
Yeah. My TikTok is so limited. I have food, dogs, and that's kind of it, actually. That's all that shows up on my TikTok because I don't spend any time.
I think
food and animals.
I was lucky enough to land myself in Dungeons and Dragons TikTok.
Oh.
And now I just watch a lot of people talking about like what they do in their D&D games.
Wow, that's awesome. I was thinking for me, like, I was literally having this thought today when I was driving. I was like, how did I end up in Desi? Like TikTok, like I don't know why. I don't
you just gotta like one video and then
See, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what Desi is. So all right,
No, okay, perfect. Let's keep it going then. So almost in the same, not in the same vein, but I want to know, what is your most overused word and why, and use it in a sentence?
In my poetry or in my plain speaking?
Either or.
In my poetry, I know 100% it is hands. It's like that's the thing I always go to. Like I'm always talking about my hands in poems. In my speech patterns, at some point I caught the like disease, and I think it's always like my brain is just trying to catch up to what I'm trying to say, and rather than just stutter whatever word like I just said, I'm gonna throw in a like and like all that stuff. But in my poetry, it's definitely hands. I'm always talking my hands.
Interesting. I like it. Let's see if it shows up in tonight's poems.
I haven't looked, but I'm sure.
All right, next question. And I asked this of all our guests, and you said you've seen some of the episodes before, so you probably already know it's coming. What is your favorite food dish to eat?
Okay. So this is hard for me because I don't like eating the same things very frequently. I'm really like, I'm the kind of like picky eater that like, I just had that a week ago, right? But I think my answer has to be like fancy cheese. You know, like give me like a manchego, you know, like give me some like good like goat cheese that's been soaked in olive oil and basil. Like this last weekend was my girlfriend's birthday, and we were choosing a restaurant because it was her birthday. It was a big deal, and we only had 2 requirements. Like we had to be able to sit outside because safety, COVID, and they had to have a cheese plate. That's cute. And like those were the requirements, and we found a place right here in Cedar Park, so that was really nice. But actually what I got her for her birthday was a really fancy like marble cheese board and like cheese knives and stuff. Like we love the charcuterie, you know. Like I saw this tweet recently that was like it was geared towards like cis guys, but it was basically like, you know, you have to figure out what kind of bougie your girl is, because not all girls are like clothes bougie. Like some of them are like book bougie, or like I am food bougie. Like, I do not take me to like Taco Bell. Like, I'm not going. I don't want it. Like, I want, like, we're not just gonna order a pizza. You know, like, I want like a really fancy cheese plate with like some prosciutto and like mixed salted nuts and like, and I want like that like real fancy toast. You know, like, it's not even crackers. It's like a toasted pita with like herb. I want the fanciest shit. That's what I'm saying.
My mouth is literally watering.
I know.
I'm
Like,
just.
I think like I said, I went back and I watched a few episodes when you invited me, and people will talk about like mashed potatoes, and I'm like, I want expensive cheese. But you know, like, that's I'm willing to spend a significant portion of my monthly budget on fancy cheese, and I'm not ashamed of it.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it. All right. So let's enter our last and final question of speed dating, even though like I am so craving just cheese right now.
Yeah, right.
Like, doesn't this just make you want to speed date me? Like, I'm gonna bring it.
Yes.
I think I have some Gruyere in the fridge right now.
I know. I mean, I didn't
slice up a Honeycrisp apple with some brie on a on a toasted like croissant, just like.
This podcast is quickly evolving into cheese and meats.
I love it.
Fuck the poetry.
Cheese and sadness, the Glori B story.
That's
your memoir. That's your memoir title.
All right. Well, Sally, we're gonna have to close this speed dating, but we can like talk more about cheese if you want to bring it up in your poetry. But you know, we are officially in fall season, right?
I don't go outside.
Yeah, well, here in the East Coast, it's fall, it's cold, and you know, I always love it that my friends always say this is a time for rest, right? And so my question for you is, in this time of rest, what do you want to take a beat from, and what do you want to come out of this moment of rest?
I'm in general in the middle of a lot of like big life changes this year. And I think I would like to not be in crisis for a little while.
No, that's true.
You know, I want to have like a week of normal days. You know, I think I'd like to take a break from like catastrophizing and being paranoid anytime like I make any choice in my life right now. And I think that's mostly like that's led to me like making decisions like I'm still quarantining. I really value like security, like in an emotional sense, and I want I want to feel safe.
Yeah. I mean, those are all important, and I feel like we really talk about that. You know, we have, but we're being more vocal about it. And I think people still need to hear that because, as some of my students have said, we are going on as if like it's just fucking business as usual, right?
Right, like nothing's happened.
Yeah.
Like people just is like, oh, is it time to get back to the office yet? And it's like, it's never going to be time to get back to the office.
Yeah.
Like, this has fundamentally changed our lives. It's fundamentally changed the priorities that we have and the level of knowledge of our own internal needs. And the parts of the world that are unwilling to make room for that are complaining really loudly, but that's not going to fix it, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, if anyone out there is watching with a buttload of expendable income, Glori B needs a week for her and her loved ones in a cabin in the woods. Yes. Where she don't have to worry about anything but just enjoying her damn self. So,
and honestly, like I don't even mean like I need a week off from work. Like I think I like I could just like have like normal boring work days and like watch TV in the evenings and just like be calm, you know? That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. So we have already dove deep. I'm so excited for where this conversation is going to continue to go
I don't do
to.
small talk.
But,
No,
yeah,
Big talk. Big
I
talk.
know. That's why when like we booked you, I was like, oh, this is going to be good. We're going to have some real talk conversation. But at this point, we would like to, because it is words and shit. So before we get into the shit, let's get some words. If you could please give us a poem to kick us off, and
Right.
as we dive into this conversation.
Headline reads, Golden State Killer motivated by breakup with fiance. And I'm reminded that it is my duty to protect the Republic with my body, with my woman, with my emotional labor. I'm reminded that a man you fear cannot be left and forgotten. He will climb up out of the newspapers to find you on your lawn in your new home, a dozen reporters sticking microphones in your face. I'm reminded that we are not allowed to leave a man who scares us, because it is better for us to be hurt than to allow him to hurt others. And you cannot even call the cops when the man who is frightening you is a cop. Headline reads, Florida shooting suspect was troubled after mother's death. And I'm reminded that we are not allowed to leave, not even when we die. That the magic of masculinity is the ability to transform anything into a motive. That a man's grief is a ticking time bomb which can only be diffused by a woman's love. Headline reads, Las Vegas gunman's girlfriend calls him kind, quiet man. And I'm reminded that we are not allowed to be wrong. That women must be mystical truth finders. It is our responsibility to see into the future, to see into a man's heart, to see the truth. And if we do not, then there is blood on our hands, always on our hands. Headline reads, Victim in homicide identified as suspect's sister. And I'm reminded of the story of Cain and Abel. I wonder how different that story would have been if Eve had been allowed to have a daughter. Would violence have entered the world this way if there had been a woman there to take the bullet and take the blame? Headline reads, Texas church shooter's ex-wife says he held a gun to her head, and I'm reminded that violence is only worthy of the headlines when it is shocking, and that violence is only shocking when it finds you in a school or a church or a movie theater, but that no one is shocked by the violence that finds you in the kitchen or the living room or the bedroom. Headline reads, Texas school shooter kills girl who rejected his advances and embarrassed him in class, and I'm reminded that saying no is just as dangerous as saying yes. I'm reminded that we are scolded for being afraid of men, and scolded for not anticipating the attack, and scolded for speaking up against their violence, and scolded for not preventing it. That no one will stop them when they are killing us, but everyone expects us to stop them from killing others. How we lay down our bodies before abusers and keep the world safe and keep their secrets and keep silent. Headline reads, Golden State Killer motivated by breakup with fiance. And still, they ask why we do not leave. And still, they ask why we do not tell.
Okay.
I always want to like stand up and walk away, you know, like
You could definitely. Oh, Glory, you could definitely do whatever you want. If you want to, for the next poem, just to like,
I'm out.
bye.
Yeah, it'd be like poem, boom,
Boom.
and then come back to us.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I almost, I've seen you perform at APS, and I've definitely seen videos of you, and it's been a while, but I'm so glad that I got to, hear you. And I know how powerful you are. But, it's just so nice to be reminded, right, of that your words, like I think, like you said, you're not going to sugarcoat it. You're going to be very direct. And that's, I think, why you've are a champion and you've won so many of these poems, these competitions, because you talk about these very hard truths, um, in these different perspectives that are always constantly silenced. So thank you for sharing that, and I appreciate it. And again, always amazing to hear your voice and your words. So yeah, I kind of want to know, like, because you're so direct with your poetry, and you, again, you never hold back. Um, it's where do you like? Was it the reason why you write from that place is because someone told you, you should be silenced, or have you always been like that? Or are you doing this for like the women that you know that couldn't speak up? Where is it coming from?
Oh, wow. That is a lot of different layers. This poem in particular sort of slapped me in the face. I remember the day that they actually caught the Golden State Killer, and it was all over the news that they'd finally caught this guy after so many years. And the headlines started coming out about it, and I kept seeing like headlines about his ex-fiance, and I was like, it has been so long since she was even a part of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that just it, like the pressure that is put on the people surrounding those who, for whatever reason, usually a mix of entitlement and like a history of abusing others, lash out in these ways that get attention. But then you look at the statistics of how many people are dealing with that kind of violence on like a personal level all the time. I definitely, when I was younger, was not the kind of person who was going to talk about any of this. I actually, when I was in college, I was in a class called Modern American Poetry. And it was a great class because it was sort of like like an upper level, like junior, senior class in college. And one of like our final project was each student in the class, and obviously I went to a very small like liberal arts university, so there were only like 16 people in class, but each of us got a school of poets to cover and we got a day of the class, and we had to teach the unit on that school of poets, and each of us chose a different school of poets. And looking at the lists of available schools, I chose the feminist poets, which it was like Adrienne Rich and Lucille Clifton and Audre Lorde, and a few others. And after class one day, because it was the kind of class where like everyone just kind of stayed in the room after class time was over and just like sat around talking and tried to like get time with the professor. After class one day, one of my classmates was like, I think it's really interesting because I know so many of the people in this class and I know their writing, that so many of us chose like the exact school that we would have fit into. And I was like, I don't know that I would really like fit into the feminist poets. And she looked at me and she was like, Gloria, do you even read your own poetry? And I was like, no. And because at the time I was writing, this was probably 2009, 2010. At the time I was mostly writing poems about being a mom. And I didn't consider that perspective to be necessarily feminist. And I hadn't learned all of the things about the world that I sort of know more about now. And I hadn't been to a poetry slam yet. And I hadn't had that education that you really can only get from slam. Like, there's this very like anti-academic, personal narrative based, like real world experience education that you get from a slam, because you were, for the most part, in slam, if you're not writing from your own perspective, you get in trouble for it, which is appropriate for the kind of like the venue and the expectations of that genre. Whereas like I think a screenwriter or a novelist will often write and that's a whole other like conversation, but they're often like writing explicit fiction, right? But there's this understanding in slam that if you are writing from something that is not your own experience, the poem's going to tell you that, and your experience is probably going to be at least adjacent enough that you have witnessed it, or that you are talking about something that you actually know about. And so it's like taking a history class, but instead of using a textbook, you're only using primary documents. And there's that education, I think, that I've gotten through slam has led my poetry to the place where it is now, where once I understand something, my poems are lesson plans, honestly. Like it's, someone finally explained this to me in a way that I understand. I've misunderstood it for years. And now I want to write something that is going to help someone who doesn't get it yet understand that. And a lot of times I'm writing from a perspective of 7 different sources and experiences and conversations that I've had, and trying to find a way to distill that into like something that is 3 minutes that you can take with you, that can potentially change your mind, or at least, if you're already on my side, give you an argument that you can take into a conversation with someone else later.
That's such an interesting concept. It's like a poem as a lesson plan. And definitely your poems have been taught, you know.
I love it.
Guest appearance, group piece.
I told her that she needed to stay off camera, and she was like, I'm gonna be quick.
I love it.
Sorry.
But your poems have definitely been taught and made an impact. I know I've used some of your poems. I reached out to you in workshops that I've taught, because you articulate thoughts and so well. And a lot of what you've done, at least the work that we're familiar with out in the world, has been through slam, and specifically on a slam team. Right, always in community with other poets. So there's definitely a collaborative, air about being on a slam team. How has that kind of like collaboration like enhanced your writing, your life, and what do you see it doing in your life these days?
I think the only reason I'm still in slam is the fact that there are teams. I think, I got in in 2012. And it was super fun for a few months, and getting to know people. And my thing, my first year slamming was I never repeated poems. I was going to write something new every time I got on stage. It was embarrassing if I didn't have 3 new poems every week for the slam. And people commented on that a lot, like how much I write. And a lot of those poems were not fully formed and weren't fully like ready. And then in 2013, I made my first 2 slam teams that year. I made the B-sides team that went to Southern Fried, and then I also made the Neo Soul Slam team that went to Nationals. And we ended up winning group piece finals that year. And it was an incredible experience to write with other poets and to perform with them. And I have a background in theater. In high school, I did theater, and in college, I got a minor in theater. And so being on stage with other people felt really secure and really right. And it enabled me to write poems that I didn't necessarily have the perspective to write on my own. I wrote a poem that first year in 2013 with another poet, Victoria Murray, called I Don't Pray. And it was from the perspective, me writing as someone who is very jaded by my experiences in church and the way that I've been treated by people of faith, and her writing as a person of faith who is like, I don't pray for more money, and I don't pray for success. Like I pray because it like fulfills me. And that is like, that's a poem I never could have written because that's not my experience. And that sort of spark of collaboration through the years, like getting to write with Teresa Johnson, man, you want to talk about someone who is just a brilliant writer and a brilliant performer, and like uses slam to make an argument. Like Teresa gets up and does like Lincoln Douglas debate for 3 minutes, you know, like,
Yes.
and writing poems with her is just this intense thing. She is absolutely my best friend, but also like one of my number one collaborators. Like we have created so many things together. A few years ago, I think at this point it's been like 7 years, 6 or 7 years. Our first show at Frontera Fest was the show Contipotence, and it was Teresa and our friend Danielle, and I, and we used, so Danielle's a storyteller, and Teresa and I do slam. And so we took poems from slam and we did some group pieces, and Danielle told a story and we ended it with a song. It was like this 25-minute play, but it was all three of us working together and having rehearsal 2 days a week meant I got to see two of my best friends like twice every week, and we were creating something and we had this sense of purpose, and it was just this amazing thing. And we went on to do that again 4 more times. We did 5 shows with Frontera Fest in 5 years, up until the pandemic canceled the festival in 2020. And well, no, it canceled the festival in 2021. So like the festival is in February, so it was like right before the pandemic in 2020. But we then worked with Doc, amazing Neo Soulja poet, like, and she has a completely different style from Teresa or I. So like the things that the three of us wrote together were just like fantastic. That show was called Bitches Anonymous. And then we had a show called Context that we wrote with Sonder, who's a poet out of Austin, who's in Houston now. And then we wrote with Elwin this show, Please Stay, that was maybe one of the most important pieces of art that I've been a part of in my entire life. It was a 25-minute play about mental health and specifically about suicide. And at our first rehearsal, I was like, okay, we're writing a 25-minute play about suicide. And our only goal is that at the end of the show, everyone in the room feels incredibly hopeful. Like that's the goal. And like, all the group pieces that we wrote for that show and all of the individual poems, like we started from a place that was like, here's how it feels and here's what we're experiencing and here's like things in our lives that have been traumatizing and here's all of these things that we're dealing with and here's reasons to stay and here's like ways to sort of deal with your brain being mean to you. And like, and at the very end of the show, we passed around these baskets that had these cards on them. And on the back of every card was like, we hand wrote like 300 of these. We had these little cards that were like, here's stay for this, right? And it was like, stay for too much whipped cream on your hot chocolate. Stay for the smell of the grass after rain. And it was like, we were super intentional that like nothing written on the cards had to do with money, had to do with other people, had to do with anything that was beyond your control and seemed out of reach, but just these really simple things. And that environment, like collaborating with two people who have been through experiences with their mental health where they were considering suicide, where they were dealing with misdiagnosis or a lack of diagnosis or struggling to get help from the medical professionals that they were dealing with. It creates that sense of like not alone. And there are so few opportunities, the way our society is structured, there are so few opportunities in life for not alone. And we just wanted not only to have this experience where for the 5 months that we were working on this play, we were not alone, but also that we projected this feeling of not alone into other people's lives. And the feedback we got on that play was so phenomenal. And the show after that was called Choice. It was a show about reproductive rights.
Wow. I think, you know, we have like always a list of poetry questions or just questions in general. And, you know, one of the ones that I think Chibbi had prepared was, you know, how has collaboration have enhanced your writing? And it really, I think you think this is the first time really that a poet said, I stay for slam because of the teams. I stay in slam because of the people, right?
Yeah.
And
I'm actually not as competitive as my resume would make you think that I am.
It's more about being in community.
Yeah.
It is. Like, my goal, honestly, my goal is always to get second place. I am the happiest I could possibly be if I get second place. And here's why. You want to do well enough that people are excited about your work and that people like respect you and they think that you're like, they take you seriously, right? Like, you want that achievement, but you don't want to win so often that they start to resent you, because then like you start to like pull away from the community in a certain way. Some of the happiest experiences I've had in slam have been like the first time someone that I mentored in slam beats me in like a big slam. It is complete joy. Like I was the coach for the first Outside Voices team, and I got to coach Addie L and Elowin out of Austin Poetry Slam scene. And the first time that like Addie beat me in a quarterfinal, I was over the moon. And everyone's like, I'm so sorry, you should have won. I was like, no, that's my baby. Like, she did it.
Yeah. No, so true, and it is so gratifying to see people, you know, come up and like just see progression, right, and the evolution of people in their writing. So with that being said, I would love to see maybe where your writing is evolving into, and if you could give us another poem, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Okay.
I love it.
I'm gonna walk off stage.
Go for it. Whatever you want to do, Glory. This is your show, you know?
Coming to the stage next. Y'all give it up for Glori B.
Oh! Glory, glory.
It is easier to drink than to go to therapy. It is easier to drink than to cry in public. It is easier to drink than to say that thing that you've never said out loud to anyone ever. It is easier to drink than to notice the way that no one in the room notices that you exist. It is easier to drink than to be alone. It is easier to drink than to process your lonely childhood, than to process your abusive relationship, than to question your lack of self-worth, than to feel your feelings. It is easier to drink. It is easier to buy 3 shots in 5 minutes than to acknowledge that you were just sexually assaulted in a bar and 3 of your friends laughed while they watched. It is easier to drink than tell your mother that you spent the last 3 Thanksgivings wanting to carve up your wrists like the turkey. It is easier to self-medicate than to properly medicate. When you don't have insurance and you don't have a diagnosis and you were raised to believe that asking for help is a weakness and you'd rather pretend that nothing is wrong and everything is fine and this is fun, we're all having fun, it is easier to have a drink than to have depression. It is easier to have a drink than to have a panic attack in public, easier to lock yourself in the bathroom and cry for 3 hours straight than to tell your friends why you locked yourself in the bathroom and cried for 3 hours straight. It is easier to pass out drunk on a stranger's floor than to admit that you just don't want to go home. It is easier to drink. It is so easy to drink. It's easy. But it is better to speak your truth than to hide under a bottle. It is better to tell your friends what happened than to pick at your scabs with a shattered wine glass. It is better to tell your therapist what happened than to drink until you don't remember. It is better to cut people out of your life who would rather you be fun than healthy. It is better to know that you can make it through the night without oblivion, to know that you can stand and say the hardest things without your voice cracking, to know that you can stand without stumbling and move the fuck on. It is better to feel your feelings in the fullness of their depth. It is better to have perspective. It is better to reach out. It is better to cry. Today, I am 6 years, 5 months, and 28 days sober. And it has not gotten any easier, but it has gotten so much better.
This is great. Great. Go ahead. I don't know if you have a swivel chair, if you want to just like swivel or just go for it. Go for it.
There we go. There's so much I want to dive into with you in this conversation and the poetry. And I think to your point, like you don't do small talk. So I want to dive into, the deep and important conversation of what a lot of people are going through right now. You were a teacher for a very long time and recently decided to leave that field, leave that career. And I think it was, just from what I know and what I've seen you talk about, was very much motivated by, I think, just a lack of compassion for safe work environments and a lot of that. So can you talk a little bit about, the decision to leave teaching, because, so many other poets do make their living as teachers, that's kind of the career avenue that a lot of writers go through. And it's becoming increasingly more difficult to feel secure in environments like that.
Yeah. Well, my plan was to be a teacher before my plan was even to be a writer. My major in college was English language arts education. I was going to be a high school English teacher. That's what I was going to do. It was the plan. And when I graduated from college, it was actually during student teaching that I first went to a slam and found out that that whole everything exists. I knew what slam was, but I thought that it happened in New York and Chicago. I didn't realize there was a local one until 2012. And I was student teaching at the time and going through a lot personally. That was the year that I got divorced. It was the year that I graduated from college and some really hard things happened. I had a friend die while I was student teaching. And it was a really intense year, and sort of slam was there to be a release valve. But teaching and beginning my teaching career at that time just kind of kept putting the pressure on. And there's a lie that they'll tell you that it'll get easier when you get experience, and it never gets any easier. Partially because they'll just keep throwing things at you, and they'll just keep taking anything that they possibly can. And as soon as you get good at something, you will be the person in charge of it for everyone. And as soon as you're struggling, they want you out the door. And the atmosphere for teachers, even before the pandemic, was I've felt for years like we were furniture, like we were seen as replaceable. Like we just have to get someone with a degree to agree to be a teacher. And even if it doesn't work out, at least for a year, we've got that room filled. And they have a lot of things that they'll call professional development, and they're just meetings. There is not a lot of actual professional development that helps you grow in your craft. And the ones that do are expensive and on your own dime and on your own time. And it came to a point where I actually finally went and sought a diagnosis for ADHD because it was affecting my work. And I had been through K through 12, I'd been through college, I'd been through several years, and Chibbi, several years of teaching full time, raising a daughter as a single mom, being a leader in the Austin Slam community, being on multiple Slam teams, running a little publishing house all on my own. And that I could handle. And suddenly, teaching, they kept putting on more and more and more and more, to the point where I couldn't handle it anymore. And it was before the pandemic. And then the pandemic happened, and we were also responsible for keeping things clean, and responsible for keeping track of who sat where, and responsible for contact tracing, and responsible for all of these things. And I was grieving the loss of two of the most important people in my entire life. Both of my grandmothers were instrumental in raising me. And through grief and fear for my sister's life and all of that, anytime it seemed like I was cracking, the administration would call me into a meeting and tell me how badly I was doing. And I would say, like, I'm sorry, I haven't slept in 3 days. And they would say, well, you need to get your stuff together because, like, it's for the kids. And, like, this idea that as a teacher, because your job is so important, you don't get to be human anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it finally came to a conversation with my principal where we were sort of like, essentially I was like, it's not going to get better until the pandemic is over. It's not going to get better until there's been some time from these like horrible experiences that I've had as a result of the pandemic and losing family members and going through all of this. And they were like, well, we don't have patience for that. And because you couldn't get better in a month while it's still happening, we would like you to not come back next year. And so I was left with this choice of like, okay, like I don't want to be at this school anymore. I was probably going to try to like get another job anyway. But that experience made me realize like I didn't want to go to another school. I didn't want to find a different campus. I didn't want to find a different principal. I didn't want to find a different teaching position. I needed an environment where it was going to be okay if I took a day off. I needed an environment where it was going to be okay for me to be a person. And I don't think that teachers are allowed to be people. And now, in my perspective, like I've got this job where I'm working as like I'm in publishing now, which is amazing and wouldn't have happened if it weren't for Slam. I'm just like a parent. And I found myself at the beginning of the school year at some of these parent meetings at my daughter's school and constantly being the person in the room is reminding the parents, like, you need to understand what teachers are going through and you need to, like, don't email and then email again 12 hours later. Like, if they don't email you back in 72 hours, send another email. But, like, you need to understand what they're going through and how much harder things are now than they were 2 years ago. And just doing the best I can to advocate for teachers. But it is a career that a lot of society's ills keep getting pushed onto. You talk about like issues of childhood poverty. Like, well, how can schools address this? And you talk about issues of children with trauma and how can schools address this? And you talk about like any issue in our culture that is endemic is foisted onto teachers who do not have the training and do not have the resources and do not have the time to deal with it. And unless we are willing to pay to put more social workers in schools, unless we're willing to pay to put more counselors in schools, those programs, it's like an unfunded mandate. Like, how am I going to be responsible for suicide prevention and nutrition and reading? You know, like it's really hard what we do to teachers. And so I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah. No, that's, I think, again, we just need reminders of that because, teachers are still people,
Teachers are people more than anyone else, I think.
Yeah.
Like the level of secondary trauma that you experience as a teacher is incredible and almost no one talks about it. You know, teachers are mandatory reporters, and because we are dealing with kids every single day, you hear stories from the kids, you know what's going on in their lives, you witness things. I had an experience at one school that I was working at where I broke up a fight and I was sent home and told to come back, but I had to go home to change clothes because there was blood on my clothes from the fight. And they expected me to very quickly go home, change, and get back as soon as I could. Like that's the kind of stress that we're putting on teachers. Like I had just witnessed someone make another person bleed And the only concern was, how quickly can you get back to your classroom in clean clothes?
Mm-hmm. You know,
sorry.
No. It's okay, because it's like, you know, we deal with that also in a collegiate level as well, and it's the same concerns, everything. Like, why, you know, we are human too, like we are going through the same things. Our, you know, yes, our students are going through a lot, but we have children at home, you know, we also have lives too. Like, it's not just the students that were affected, we also went through this as well. And just the idea of like, but we have to be there for our students is like, but is even like our president, or even is the admin or the higher ups, like, are they there for even for us, you know? But they're not. It's because it's, again, money.
The year that I was on Neo Soul in 2016, when we made final stage at nationals, one of our group pieces that we did in semifinals to make final stage was a group piece called Cup Song, and it was about teen suicide. And I was kind of in the middle of Teresa Johnson and Brian Francis, and they were talking like statistics and like motivational posters, and like, we need to do something for these kids, and we need to tell them it's gonna be okay. And I'm standing in the middle like, okay, here's the deal. Like, I'm a teacher and I'm actually in the room with these kids, and we need to stop telling them it's gonna be okay, and we need to start telling them like, I'm here with you until it's okay. And like, it's a different thing. And in that poem I talk about, so one of the years that I was teaching sixth grade, we had an outbreak of cutting. And I'm sorry, I should have given content warnings. I feel like if people know if you're talking to me, like there's content warnings. But there was an outbreak, and it became extremely like popular among the sixth graders. Like, they were trying it, and there were rumors about who was cutting and who wasn't. And I felt like for several months, like almost at least once a week, I had to call the sixth grade counselor and have him come down to my room to pick up a kid. And it was literally just a phone call. It was like, hey, Matt, it's happening again. Can you come by? You know, that was the code. And we had a super last minute like training, the teachers. And I was sitting in this training with like a bunch of other teachers. And this guy who clearly has never experienced depression in his life says something to the effect of like, well, how do we know which ones are really doing it and which ones are doing it for attention? And I was like, and the line that I wrote for that poem is like, and I looked around this room and realized that I was the only person in the room with the scars to qualify me to fix what was wrong with what he was saying. You know, like, even the people running the training didn't have any experience and didn't have that firsthand knowledge of like why people try that and why people continue to do it once they have tried, and what it takes to get past that kind of emotional struggle. And the experiences that I had teaching, I've written so many poems about teaching. I don't perform them anymore because I feel like it's weird to do poems about teaching when you're not a teacher anymore. But it was an extremely intense period of my life. 9 years in classrooms, most of them working with students who were living in poverty, just based on the school we had. The school I was working at was like an 89% kids on reduced lunch and kids who were economically disadvantaged. And you come in contact with so many different truths, and it's constantly like the adults don't have those experiences, and so they don't respect them. And being the adult in the room who had that experience when I was younger always meant that I was in a position to have to out my trauma, have to out myself to my colleagues and my peers, to have to take this situation and make it really personal for everyone in the room, so that not like I wouldn't like out myself in a big meeting, but like one-on-one, like when someone said something like what that guy said. When I would talk to him, I would be like, here's why what you said was hurtful to me, and here's why if you ever say that in front of a student, I will be so disappointed in you.
Well, like you said, that was 9 years of your life with students, but now I want to try and like land this conversation on maybe a positive note for the present and the future. You said something in there that really caught my attention, which was you now have a job that like Slam made possible, right? That you wouldn't have had if it wasn't for Slam. Can you talk about that? Because like we all. Nobody makes maybe some people make a career out of Slam, but like, right. Like a lot of people think of Slam as like a hobby, but you're now in a job that you said you wouldn't have if it wasn't for Slam.
No,
Can you talk about that?
I would not have been able to build a resume out of my teaching experience to get the job that I have now. I've always kind of had an interest in publishing. In 2014, I started a super small press publishing poets in Austin, publishing some of my own books, some of Teresa's. I published Professor J and Doc and Victoria Murray and Ash Vernon and Colleen. And I'm blanking on other people, but like I've published over a dozen different poets and also published for teams for like their fundraising chat books and things. So a lot of like little anthologies like that. And all of the work that I've done through Slam and those connections and publishing books for those people, I got to put on my resume that I had experience in publishing. I got to put on my resume that I had experience on a board of directors. I got to put on my resume that I had experience maintaining records for an organization, maintaining spreadsheets, that I had experience planning and running events, that I had experience doing design work. All of these things that we just kind of do in Slam. Like there are so many things that need to get done to make a show happen. Someone has to make a flyer, someone has to make a Facebook event, someone has to invite people, someone has to get up on the mic every week and talk about this event that's coming up, someone has to show up and set up chairs, someone has to figure out who's working the door and who's gonna host and who's the DJ for this event. And there are so many administrative tasks that you end up doing as a result of just getting involved and volunteering with the Slam community. That by the end of it, like the things that I was able to put on my resume, not like I was padding my resume, but like taking a step back and going like, no, I've been on the board of an organization running a weekly event in Austin for 8 years. That belongs on my resume, and that is work that I did and is valuable and important to this community. And really like seeing it not just like Slam is just this thing I do on Tuesday nights. It's just like this fun little thing I do. Like there's so much that goes into it, and there's skills that cross over into other areas of your life. And so now I'm working as an editorial coordinator. I work on medical research journals, and I spend most of my day emailing doctors, trying to get them to fill out their paperwork and format their submissions correctly, and arranging for peer reviews and things like that. And it's it's something I can do from home, and it's something that I can do where if I'm having a really hard day mentally, emotionally, like I can just put on music and work at a slow pace. If I'm feeling really hype, I can get yesterday's work done and then today's work, because like all that anyone cares about is that my work is done at the end of the week. And that kind of trust and respect is something I was always missing from teaching.
Well, good for you, says Truly B. Vane. And also, as someone who is married to a nurse, I know how difficult it is to hound down doctors for any sort of information.
You know what? Like, I like to joke that like my job now isn't that different than teaching middle school. Like, there's not a ton of difference between the ego of a middle school boy and a doctor. And like all I need is for you to just do your homework. Please, like, I know that you really want this published and you really want to get an A on it. So maybe you should do your paperwork.
Oh my God.
Oh, man. That's great. I really appreciate your trajectory of teaching to really the empowerment of, again, going back to this collective of writing or creating and publishing your friends and your team members, and kind of having this overall circle back to community within the poetry community. And I think that's beautiful. We can keep talking for so long. So great to hear you, and the way that you just talk, it's like so no, it's just like so nice. And it's like I've been talking to a friend for a long time. It's just it's nice, and I love to hear it.
Next time we need a charcuterie board.
Yes.
Pulleys and cheese.
Exactly. I guess what I want to say is, I know we don't want to go, but if you can just bless us with, another look, another swivel, your words.
We got time for one more poem?
One more poem.
All right.
Bring us home.
So, quick story about this poem. I like to do this thing where I go to the slam and I write a poem and I have to finish it before I get on stage. So I will arrive at the slam at like 7, and then we have the draw and I find out what order I'm in, and I just have to finish my poem before that happens. So this was, there was a brief period of time, like when people were vaccinated in June and like the numbers were good in Austin, and I like went to a couple slams, and then like we went back into the red and I had to come back home and quarantine again. But this is the last poem that I got to write at a slam live. And I'd like to do that. So bees don't know that they are pollinators. It's not a term they invented for themselves. As far as the bee knows, touching their bodies to the center of the flower, bathing in the pollen within, is just an instinct, just a job with a purpose, just a joy, a delicious must-do, an imperative, a need, a yes, please. Honeybees, masters of memory, remember every flower they have touched, how to get back to that flower, how long it takes to get to that flower, how long it's been since their last visit, how long it takes for flowers to produce new pollen. From flower to flower to flower, they move, collecting what they need, shaking their bodies to vibrate the pollen loose, dropping what they have in order to collect more. They spread the wealth around, not because they know that they are pollinators, but because it's what they do. Because it's how they live, because it's who they are. Bees cannot tell you anything about the anther or the stigma of a flower, do not know the word petal, but feel the call of the color across the meadow. Go where they are needed without knowing that they are. Bees are strangely adapted to pollination. Their bodies are fuzzy, trapping particles easily. Their bodies carry an electrostatic charge, so particles stick to them like magnets. Honeybees have specialized structures on their legs called a scopa or a corbicula. Their bodies are made from birth to drink nectar and gather pollen, but they do not know that they are pollinators. They do not know that the world would have no almonds without them. They do not know that apples and cranberries and melons and blueberries and cucumbers and celery and strawberries and beets and coconuts and carrots and mangoes and pears would wither on the vine without them, would grow to maturity and wilt before passing on their genes, would yield crops of dust and hunger if it weren't for bees and their activity and their labor and their work. But bees do not know that they are pollinators. So how dare you call yourself worthless? How dare you presume to know whether anyone would care if you were gone? How dare you close your mouth around a pill or a pistol with the sorry excuse that the world would be better without you and all of the beautiful things that you don't even know that you are doing? All this language and science can tell us the place bees take in the ecosystem, can describe to us the instincts that draw them to your garden, can observe their behavior and track the gifts bestowed by evolution. But bees do not know that they are pollinators.
Mm.
So if you do not yet know your purpose, if you feel as if all you do is flit from pretty thing to pretty thing, if you cannot remember the last flower that you found, then eat an almond or an apple or a strawberry. Make a salad of cucumber, broccoli, cabbage, carrot, and sunflower seeds with slices of pear and dried cranberries. And remember, you bring more to this world than you could ever know. And if you leave us now, I do not know what on earth we will do without you next spring.
That's so amazing.
Woo.
Oh,
Woo. Glory be, master of the extended metaphor.
yes.
More poems about bees.
Yeah. Like,
And
part of me was like, oh, is Glory B going to be like, and I too am a bee, hence the Glory B. I was ready for it. But
No,
even then,
no. And I don't think you used the word hands in any of your poems.
no,
tonight.
you
I
didn't.
definitely did in the first one.
Boo. All right. Well, almost. Oh, stop it. So thank you so much for this incredible conversation and sharing your amazing work. I know we have it displayed on screen at the bottom of the screen, but for anybody that's listening to the podcast after this, where can people find you? Where can people find your work? All of that good stuff. Can you talk about that?
So many of my poems are up on right about now, and you can find a lot of them if you go to my Facebook. It's facebook.com/glory.poet, and or going to Right About Now's Facebook page or YouTube page and searching Glory B poetry. There's a singer that goes by Glory B as well, so you might get some of her stuff. You can find me on Twitter at Being Glory, the word being and glory with an I. But I mostly tweet about politics and Dungeons and Dragons, so not a lot of poetry, mostly Dungeons and Dragons. I have a website if you are interested in having me like design a website for you. I took a course in UX design and have been maintaining records for the Slam for a while, so that's a service I provide. And then like Chibbi, you asked me to put my Venmo. I feel weird asking people for money, but I will take it. I will. And I will buy expensive cheese. No, I'll probably pay my rent.
There you go. I love it.
But my Venmo is Glory, GLORI-Adams. Might be Gloria Adams, actually.
Yeah.
I should check. It's either Glory or Gloria Adams.
There you go. Well, one more time for Glory B, y'all. Gloria and I do have slated to write a group piece about our love for Excel spreadsheets via Google Documents. It's going to happen.
Google spreadsheets, like Google spreadsheets knocks Excel out of the water. And I can't explain to people why, but there's just something like I think it's just that you can remove columns on Google Sheets and you can't remove columns on Excel. So if you want a spreadsheet that's only 7 columns wide, you can do it in Google Sheets. And for some reason, that's just so exciting to me.
Coming soon. But thank you so much for this incredible hour. Y'all show some love.
Thanks for having me. This was a nice break from nothing.
Thank you again. Thank you, Glory.
All right, bye.
Okay,
friend. Woo!
Oh man, I think we always have to kind of just reflect on that. I just feel very validated, right? Over and over again, right? That this pandemic is still happening, that we still have feelings around it, that we're still not okay, and it's okay to say we're not okay, right? Yeah. And that we're still feeling the effects. Many people are still feeling the effects of it, and it's I'm very, very glad for Glory's words. And like I said, it's always so amazing to like hear her and advocate in such like very, very needed and well, um, I, like subjects that are hard to speak of, but are always needed. So.
Always necessary. Glori B, definitely a necessary voice in this world. So we were just excited to have her on, for sure. Well, thank you to the audience who tuned in tonight and watched live. The comment section was very active tonight. So loving it. And thank you if you are listening to this on the podcast afterwards. We are always here at your convenience.
Yeah, and then if you're not following us, where you at?
What are you waiting for?
What are you doing? Okay, but please follow us on Instagram and in Twitter at Words and Shh, right? The shh. There's no IT. Definitely, we would love to you to follow, and that's where we show you the most up-to-date information, who's coming up next every week.
Because we have some incredible people coming up next. But whether this is your first time tuning in or whether you've been here before, you can always find past episodes wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. You just go to youtube.com/wordsandshit. It's that simple.
And if not, definitely, if this is your first time or not, come back next week, same time, same place, for our next feature. That's going to be Anthony the Poet Flores, a local San Antonio iconic poet. It's going to be really fun.
Yeah, a San Antonio institution for sure. Until next time, stay safe out there.
Okay, bendiciones. Mwah.